everyone, welcome to day one of Vlogmas. And from the thumbnail, you know we will be sewing a reading pillow. All right, so like I mentioned in my announcement video, which I will post here, but also in the description box below, the pattern that we will be using is Quick Sew 4319 is the pattern that I will be using, but of course you could get Simplicity 9513. For this pattern, it's the same thing. The instructions are the same. It's just I have this pattern and I want to use the Quick Sew pattern and keep my Simplicity pattern fresh copied. All right. But I have both, but I just went ahead and pulled this one out instead of the Simplicity pattern. But once again, it's Quick Sew 4319. We will be doing View C, the reading pillow, or you can use Simplicity 9513 as well. All right. Now, we're going to go ahead and go over the tools and supplies that you need. However, just go to my sewing toolkit. It will tell you all of the tools and supplies you need for any of the project. So just make sure you have that when you get ready to sew any of my projects, right? So instead of me going into this toolkit, let's talk about the notions used that you will need in order to construct this reading pillow. So the reading pillow is View C. So all you're going to need is, of course, your fabric. Just look at the back of the envelope and it'll tell you which fabrics you will need. We'll get into the different colors if you want a color block here shortly. But in terms of notions, you will need for View C, you'll need 7/8 to 1 inch wide ribbon, cross grain ribbon, 1/4 of that. And then you will also need hook and loop tape as well as polyfill. So you need a 1/2 inch hook and loop tape and some polyfill or a pillow form. Now for me, for the sake of the pillow, I'm gonna actually use a pillow form. A pillow form or like an actual already made pillow instead of polyfill. Now, one thing I'm going to say is this is not for me. This is actually, I'm making the pillow for my daughter. So we're just going to put a pillow in there, okay? But when you are seeing this, it's not going to have a pillow. We'll put the pillow in there after I'm completely done as well. All right? So now that I talked about that, make sure you have your handy dandy instructions. I'm going to say if you missed my video, how I prep my projects, I'll go ahead and link that in the description box below. But we talked about instructions. That means go ahead and read those instructions twice before getting started. Of course, you know your girl didn't read these instructions 2 to 3 times before I started getting started, okay, with this reading pillow. All right, so now that we showed which pattern I'm going to be doing, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the instructions. All right, so before I get into the pattern pieces, now for this project, it's not many steps, to be honest with you guys, which is why I want to put this as day number 1 of this project. Now, we are on page number 3 for the reading pillow, which is View C. So we're going to be doing steps number 14 to 30, which is a total of 16 steps, 17 steps, right? Now, some of these steps you don't need to do if you do not want to use the hook and loop tape. You don't have to if you don't want to, but you can put Velcro there if you want to. It's just, I'm going to be using some hook and loop tape, which I will show you when I get to that step, all right? Also, another thing I will tell you is for your interfacing, if you missed that, which I will talk here shortly, your interfacing is flannel. So if you have some scrap flannel from you making some pajamas or some pants or a robe or whatever, go grab it. The whole point of these projects is to sew up items that with fabric in your stash. All right. So I've been using stash. Now I did order some fabric from Joann's just for this for the holidays. But normally what you can do is use up scrap fabric that you have in your stash already. All right. Now that I said all of that, let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces that you will need in order to construct this reading pillow. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct this pillow. So it's not many pattern pieces, to be honest with you. So from the instructions, you will need pattern piece number 4 through 9, all right? So that's 6 pattern pieces, pattern piece number 4 through 9. So let's go ahead and look at those pieces. Now, one thing I want to mention is Simplicity 9513 is still in your local Joann's So you're able to still get this. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the pattern pieces. First pattern piece is pattern piece number 4, which is your front. You need to cut one of fabric and one of interfacing. Now let's talk about fabric real quick while I'm here. So I have selected 3 different three different prints or 3 different fabric choices. So you'll have a fabric one, a main fabric, a pocket fabric, things of that nature, right? So what I did was I selected 3 different fabrics for my fabric pillow. Now you can select 2, you can select 3, but here shortly I'll tell you how I went about selecting my fabric. Now for the front and the back, I used the same fabric, okay? So for the front, which is pattern piece number 4, and pattern piece number 5, I used the same fabric, okay? So for my front pocket, which is pattern piece number 6, I used a different fabric, which was a striped fabric. I'll show you later. The front pocket, the little small pocket, I used a different fabric there. And then the pillow insert, I used the same fabric as my smaller pocket, but I'll show you here shortly. Getting back to the pattern piece number 4, you need to cut one of fabric, one of interfacing, and your interfacing is flannel fabric. Do not use fleece. Make sure you have flannel fabric. Now I just used some solid fabric from my stash to match it with the red because it was already in my stash from when I did a Sew Your View color block sweater or sweatshirt is what I did. So I just had some left over and I used that. But this is pattern piece number 4. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 5, which is the back of your pillow. And same thing, you're going to cut one of fabric, one of interfacing. And one thing I want to mention is this note right here that all of your seam allowance will be a 1/2 inch. Normally we sew at 5/8 of an inch, but for this project, the seam allowance is a 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, moving over to the next pattern piece. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 6, which is your front pocket. You need to cut one of fabric. Now this is fabric number 2. Also make sure you transfer that placement line. And also make sure you take note of the stitching line. So the stitching line, I believe, is 2 inches from the top. And make sure, I'm going to put it up on the screen as well. The stitching line is about 2.5 inches from the top of your fabric. So if you are drafting this, make sure you create a square. I'm going to have it in the Google document. I'm going to have the square where you need to create your fold line, where you need to create your stitching line, and how far from the left and the middle you need to create your placement line. All of that will be in the Google document. All right, you're welcome. All right, but this is pattern piece number 6, the front pocket. You need to cut one of fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 7. Now this one right here for pattern piece number 7 is your pocket for view C, which is the reading pillow. You need to cut one of fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 8. Now this is your bottom tab. You need to cut one of fabric, and this is the same fabric as the front and the back, and it's going to go at the bottom as well. All right, but this is pattern piece number 8, your bottom tab, and you need to cut one of fabric. Next pattern piece and the last pattern piece is pattern piece number 9. Now this is your pillow insert, how you're going to stick your pillow in, right? You need to cut 2 of fabric. All right, well, that's all of the pattern pieces that you need to cut. So let's go ahead and get right on into the sewing. All right, one thing I want to mention before we start sewing is the ribbon. So now let me tell you this. I know you're like, Rochelle, you got pink ribbon. Why? Here's the thing. So the ribbon is 7/8 to 1 inch ribbon, and that's what I have. I'm using what's in my stash because I don't use ribbon a lot, and this was in my stash from a project I created a while ago. So because I seen that I had 7/8 inch wide ribbon, I just cut what was on the back of the pattern envelope. And I believe from the pattern envelope, you needed 1/4 of a yard. So since it's 1/4 of a yard, that means 9 inches. So make sure that your ribbon is 9 inches wide. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Starting with pattern piece number 4. So grab pattern piece number 4, which is your front for your pillow. And what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and base, all right? So you're going to base all the way around the front pattern piece and make it serve as one pattern piece. You're going to do the same thing for the back. So what you're going to do is you're going to pin all the way across the sides and the bottom, and then this serves as one pattern piece. So you want to put the wrong side of this fabric to the right, wrong side, whatever, of this fabric, because you're not going to see it, all right? So just make sure that you pin and then baste all the way around. Now I'm going to, since the seam allowance is a 1/2 inch, I'm going to baste all the way around at a 1/4 inch so I don't have to pick out any basting stitches at a later time. All right, so go ahead and pin all the way around for both pattern piece number 4 and 5, and then baste at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it pinned all the way around, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance and a basting stitch, baste across the top and the bottom and both sides. Do that for both pattern piece number 4, the front, and 5, the back. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have the sides, the top, and the bottom basted, the top, the sides, and the bottom basted. The next thing we're going to do is at the bottom, that's where you have that placement line. At the bottom, I'm going to turn it over so you can see this. We're going to go ahead and press up 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to take that line all the way up to your stitching line. Now my stitching line is where you see this blue. Now if you have not marked your stitching line, go ahead and mark your stitching line. I just basically marked at both sides in blue so I know where my stitching line is. So what you're going to do, turn it on the wrong side up facing you. You're going to press 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way across at the bottom, and then you're going to take that all the way up to that stitching line. So let me get to my stitching line right here. It's going to look like this. So this is going to be folded in. And then you're going to stitch as close as possible to that top edge, okay? So go ahead and do that now. So one thing I want to mention before you go and sew that in place, I don't want anyone to get tripped up. So I'm going to bring my pattern piece back. So where I have the lines, that's the stitching line. That's where you're going to be stitching at. But if you take notice right here, this is the fold line. And the fold line is about 1.5 inches above the bottom line, okay? So when you basically fold this in, you're gonna press up 3/8 of an inch, but then you're going to basically press up about 1 1/8 inches per se, and then you're going to be stitching on that stitching line. I hope that makes sense. So that's what you're going to do. Go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back and continue with the next step. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I wanted to show you guys this before I stitched it. So I have it pressed in 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at the bottom, and then I pressed it up towards the fold line, which is the blue line that you see here. So this is what it's looking like. Now, one thing I want to mention is I pinned on the right side instead of the wrong side because I'm not going to stitch this way because it'll be visible on the right side of my reading pillow. So I don't want that. So what I'm doing is I pinned on the right side, and I'm going to go to my sewing machine and stitched all the way across, making sure I stitch as close to that stitching line as possible. Now, if you did not mark your stitching line, you probably can't see it, but I have a blue line right here. Mark your stitching line all the way across, and then just sew as on the line as possible. All right. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so this is what my pillow, my front is looking like of my reading pillow. All right, I have that stitched in. So the next thing you're gonna do is grab your ribbon. Now this is my pink ribbon. It's not going to match that. So I'm not using the ribbon. What I did was basically cut a piece of fabric out and interface to make it stiff. So this is really, really flimsy. So all I did was cut a piece of ribbon out and then just basically cut a piece of fabric out, interfaced it, and then trimmed it down to 7.5 inches wide, like it says in the instruction. Now I have my safety pin in, and I'm just going to go in and basically pull it out to where it's right side out. Now, one thing I'm going to mention is I just sewed both of the sides down, the long side, using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So if you want to do what I'm doing, because you want to make your hook portion, the top portion where it's going to be hooked at, match, you can do the same thing as well. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn this, what they're calling a ribbon, but I'm just going to say a fabric ribbon. I'm turning this right side out like this, and I'm going to give it a good press. All right. Now I'm just going to show you what you're going to do next, but I'm going to give it a good press before I put it on here. But you have 2 dots here and you have 2 dots here. This is still the front of my fabric, my pillow fabric. Okay. So I'm going to match up this to those 2 dots right there, and I'm going to pin. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other 2 dots. I'm just going to move this like this. And there's 2 dots right here, and I'm just going to basically pin in between those 2 dots, just like that, and pin. Then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and baste across using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my ribbon, if you did not do the fabric ribbon, you could have done the other way as well. It's completely up to you. Now, one thing I want to mention is this. One thing I noticed is this placement line is not underneath, it's on top, because that's where our fold line is, right? So let me show you the pattern piece, right? So our fold line is right here, and it told you to fold to that fold line, and then we're gonna stitch on that stitching line, which is what I did, which gives you this, what you're looking at, right? Let's go through the instructions real quick. So we are on step number 16, right? If you notice, you do not see that placement line right here, right? But when you go to number 17, it tells you to cut a piece of hook and loop tape. By the way, that's considered Velcro, just like this. And, you know, this is just basically Velcro, like you see, Velcro. And the part that's like hard right here is called your hook. And the part that's soft is called your loop, all right? And they just go together like that, like husbands and wife, right? So that's what we'll be doing here shortly. But just so you know, it says cut 1 piece of Velcro is what I'm going to call it. You're going to measure 11 inches long, which this piece right here is 11 and an eighth of an inch long. This placement line, that's what they're talking about, that 11 inch. You're going to separate the tape. If it's together, mine is not together, so there's nothing for me to have to separate. But if you have Velcro that is stuck together like this, you're going to have to separate it like this and then use the hard part, which is the hook, and place it in that line right here. So just to give you that, you will place it right here and then sew down, okay? That's what you're going to be essentially doing, all right? Now, I'm going to move my Velcro out of the way, but look at step number 17. If you notice that this is actually showing on the wrong side instead of the right side. So what I'm going to say it wants you to do is basically you need to basically hide this tape on the wrong side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my stitching out, right? And then I'm going to have this come all the way up to where it needs to be, where this placement line is hiding on the wrong side, okay? So that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that, and I'll come back and we'll continue. All right, so one thing I wanted to do is show you any mistakes that are on the pattern instructions, okay? So I didn't realize this when I first read the instructions, but I want to say correction to the instructions, okay? That's why I say read 2 or 3 times. Now, first things first, I went ahead and correct what was incorrect from what the instructions told me to do, all right? So the first thing you're going to do is press up 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then now this is my fold line. This line right here is my fold line, and then this is my placement line. Now, in the instructions, it told me to fold to my fold line and then stitch. what they want you to do is fold to your stitching line, okay? So this is your stitching line right here. You're gonna fold to that line. You see the stitching line? You're gonna basically fold to your stitching line, but then stitch close to your press 3/8 of an inch edge, okay? Now I'm going to be stitching on the right side, but make sure that you can see your placement line on the wrong side of your fabric, okay? If your placement line is on the right side, it's wrong. If your placement line is on the wrong side like this, you are good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and stitch that, stitch the bottom portion up now. All right, so now I went ahead and fixed that, and this is what we are, you know, armed with right now. So this is what it looks like. I'm gonna turn it to the wrong side so you can see my placement line. And then I'm gonna grab my Velcro. I'm gonna grab the hook part, which is the part that have that rough feel or whatever. I'm gonna grab that and I'm going to definitely cut a piece that measure 11 inches long. And then I'm just gonna basically sew that down on the top and on the bottom, all right? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the hook, which is the hard part of the Velcro pinned on, what you're going to do is you're going to stitch on your hook tape as close to the top and bottom edge as possible to keep it in place, all right? So go ahead and stitch your hook tape on now. Now, also remind you that the other portion of your tape will go on at the bottom portion here in a minute. So we'll do the loop part, which is the soft part, here shortly. So hold on to the loop. Do not sew that on. Just make sure you sew on your hook now. All right, so go ahead and stitch the top and the bottom in place as close to the edge as possible on the actual tape. All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the hook portion of the Velcro sewn on, this is what it looks like. Turn it to the right side. This is what it's looking like. Go ahead and move the front off to the side real quick, not too far. Grab pattern piece number 6. Now this is your front pocket. And of course the seam allowance is a 1/2 inch seam allowance, all right? So move your pattern piece out of the way. And now what we're gonna do is essentially the same thing. So you're gonna take the top, you're going to press 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to the inside, and then you're going to fold along the fold line. Now I make little clips at the side so I know where my fold line is, and then you're gonna press that as well. So let me show you the pattern piece. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold. Now I'm just going to show you on the pattern piece without the fabric underneath. You're just going to fold 3/8 of an inch seam allowance just like this. And then you're going to take that and on the fold line, you're going to fold it to the fold line just like that, okay? And press. Then what you're going to do is flip it over to the right side, and then you're going to stitch along that stitching line as close to the edge as possible, all right? So that's what you're going to do. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and I'm going to pin on the right side because I want my stitches to look very good on the right side. I don't want the wrong side on the right side. That's going to be visibly seen, all right? So I'm going to pin all the way across close to the edge because that's where I'm going to be sewing at. And now what I'm going to do is using a regular length stitch. Now I'm going to use 2.5, but if you've been using 3.0, you can use 3.0 as well. But I'm going to sew close to the edge all the way across and then give it a press. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have pattern piece number 6 done, which is the pocket. So with pattern piece number 6, go ahead and move this out of the way because this is your front pocket. Move that out of the way, but not too far. Now grab pattern piece number 7. Now this is how you do a regular pocket. I have shown you how to do regular pockets before. So what you're going to do now, this is my right side. Make sure you mark the wrong side. So let me grab my pen and mark the wrong side of my fabric now. All right, so I'm gonna mark the wrong side of my fabric, which is here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fold in we're gonna fold in 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to the inside like this, like we normally do. Then we're gonna turn it, after doing that, we're gonna turn it, fold it down to that fold line and create pretty much a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around to do our pockets, okay? So now you guys have done pockets before, but you know, so I shouldn't need to walk you through this portion, but after you basically sew, now, like I said, the seam allowance is a 1/2 inch unless otherwise stated. Now on this pattern piece, it says a 1/2 inch. So just to kind of walk you through this, because this is a little different, fold 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to the inside. So you're looking at the wrong side of your fabric. We're gonna fold 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and give it a press, okay? So go ahead and give it a press. Now that you have pressed it, now mine is not pressed, but it will be once I finish with this. Turn it over to where you're looking at the right side of the fabric, okay? It should look like this. Now you're gonna take the top and fold it where that fold line, like I told you, I have clips on both sides, so I know where my fold line is, okay? Now, what we're gonna do is, now that you have that folded and everything looking good so far, we're going to make a stitching down, across, and back up the other side using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then once you do that, you're gonna turn it right side out and give it a press to form your pocket, all right? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have the pocket completely done, this is what it looks like. Go ahead and grab pattern piece number six, which is your front pocket. That's this piece right here. And then what you want to do is take your other pocket, your smaller pocket, and you want to basically pin inside that placement line. Now, I told you at the very beginning of this video to make sure that you transfer all your dots, markings, and all that good stuff, and to transfer your placement line. And this is the reason why you need to transfer that placement line, because you will be sewing your smaller pocket, which is this red color. It's actually burgundy if you really think about it. It's scrap fabric from when I did Vintage Fimber, the jumpsuit. So I'll also put that jumpsuit in the description box below if you're interested in viewing that video. But back to this one, I'm just gonna go ahead and pin all the way around. So go ahead and pin your smaller pocket into, on your fabric now inside that placement line. So go ahead and do that. All right, so now that I have the pocket inside the placement line, I'm just going to sew close to the edge. I'm gonna sew both sides and the bottom, leaving this top portion free, all right? So go ahead and sew close to the edge using a regular length stitch at 2.5, close to the edge, the sides and the bottom now. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have our front pocket piece together, I have that attached. Go ahead and grab pattern piece number 5, which is your back. And what we're going to do is, with right sides together, we're gonna pin pattern piece number 6 to pattern piece number 5 at the bottom. Now make sure you have your notches. You have notches here at the bottom. Now, one thing before I get started doing this, make sure you have, you should have done this when you did pattern piece number 4. You were supposed to apply your flannel, which is your fusible interfacing, right? Your flannel to the back of pattern piece number 5, okay? So now what we're gonna do, I'm going to turn it to where the bottom is at the very top, okay? So you have notches right here, pin at the notch. You're gonna pin all the way across and then pin up the sides, okay? Making sure you're matching all of your notches and your dots, all right? So go ahead and pin both sides and the bottom now. All right, so now that I have the front pocket pinned onto the back, what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and base the sides and the bottom, all right? So go ahead and base the sides and the bottom. I'm just gonna do a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, but do whatever suits your fancy, all right? So I'm just gonna sew a 1/4 of an inch or maybe an 1/8 of an inch, just basing down and across. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the front pocket pinned onto the back and I have it basted, the sides and the bottom, go ahead and move this out of the way and grab pattern piece number 8, which is your bottom tab, okay? So what we're gonna do here, this is pattern piece number 8. Make sure you have your notch transferred. Make sure you transferred the placement line and make sure that you have marked your dots, okay? This is pattern piece number 8. And what you're gonna do is with right sides together, you're going to pin the sides, okay? So go ahead and pin both sides. Now, you know, you can go ahead and press it because you're folding this in half. You can do that as well. Me, I'll go ahead and press it at a different time, okay? So go ahead and pin the side seams now. And then what we're gonna do is go to the sewing machine and using a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance, we're gonna stitch both sides down, all right? After you stitch both sides down, give it a small trim it down, and then turn it right side out and give it a press. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my pattern piece number 8 completely folded, so this is your bottom tab. So I folded right sides together. I sewed using 1/2 an inch seam allowance, and then I turned it right side out, gave it a press. Now go ahead and grab your loop, okay? So remember the rough one was your hook. Now the soft part is called your loop of your Velcro. Now, I don't know who decided to call it hook and eye tape, but what we go call in 2023 is Velcro, all right? So place this Velcro in between your placement line like we did for the hook. Grab your pins, and then we're gonna do the same thing that we did for the hook. We're gonna go ahead and pin it inside that placement line. You know, just make sure that one is on that placement line, and then you're gonna sew both of your longest sides, the long sides of both of your soft tape, okay? So go ahead and pin all the way down on both sides, just like so. Now that I have it pinned, we're gonna go ahead and sew as close to the edge as possible at the top and at the bottom, all right? Then once you do that, go ahead and grab pattern piece, well, actually the front. You're gonna grab the front. Just make sure you sew the top and the bottom. After you do that, you're going to turn this like this, and you're going to baste it at the bottom, okay? Once again, after you sew on your loop, which is the soft portion, right? You're gonna have that face down, and then you're going to place this on top at the bottom, matching up the notch. You're gonna pin and then baste all the way across using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, all right? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the bottom tab sewn on, go ahead and leave that like that. Go ahead and grab pattern piece number 4, but it's the front. And then what we're gonna do, we're in the home stretch, you guys. It's almost done and over with. We're going to pin the front to the back, right sides together, and we're gonna basically pin the sides, the top, and the other side. So both sides and the top are what we're going to pin, all right? So I'm gonna turn it to one side at matching up those notches that you have there. Make sure you match up those notches, and then you're going to pin both sides and the top, all right? So go ahead and pin the front to the back, the tops and the sides now. Now, if you need to use some Wonder Clips, you could do that as well. However you decide to want to use it, because it does get a little thick in some places when you have so many fabrics bunched up together. So just make sure you can use Wonder Clips if you want to. All right, so go ahead and finish pinning both sides and the tops now. All right, so now that I have the front pinned to the back, right sides together, it's pinned both sides and the top. What we're gonna do is go to the sewing machine using, now I am going to be using 3.0 because it is a little thicker, having so many pieces of fabric together, but I'm gonna use 3.0, which is a regular length stitch, and a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna sew both sides and the top. Make sure that there's a loop up at the top. Make sure you have that pressed down and out of your way to where you do not get it bunched up in your stitching. All right, just make sure that it's pressed down. All right, so go to your sewing machine and do that now, and then trim it down to about 1/4 inch and turn it right side out. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it sewn all the way around, this is what it's looking like. Now what we're gonna do is go ahead, stick our hands inside of your reading pillow, and I'm going to turn it right side out. Make sure you have your handy dandy point turner to not poke a hole through it, but you wanna poke out those corners right here. Very softly. Do not do it too hard to poke a hole in there after you have done some incredible work for the last hour, because honey, you are almost there. And if you made it this far and you like what you see, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe button. Also smash that notification bell so you are notified every time your girl uploads a new video. You know how to do it. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and finish poking out those corners right there. So it's looking really good. Now I know you're like, Rochelle, what's going on with this part? Because that's not what it looks like on the front of the pattern. I got you. Just hold on, hold tight. We doing it baby steps, okay? So now we're gonna take this part, fold it down, take this part, which is your front pocket, and we're gonna pull it in just like that, okay? Pull it in just like that. So now you're looking at it like this. Make sure you use your point turner and poke out these corners, okay? Now, like I said, we're almost there. Baby steps, baby. Baby steps. Baby steps, baby. All right. So now, one thing I want to show you is on the inside of this pillow, you have what is called hook and loop tape. We don't call it hook and loop tape in 2023, y'all. So whoever wrote these instructions, please call it Velcro, all right? So if you notice, your Velcro and your hook and loop tape should match up evenly all the way across. Now, one thing I want to tell you is you're going to use this here shortly, but it will match up all the way across for your reading pillow. So I'm just going to push it back in just like this. All right. I'm going to undo my Velcro portion. And the reason why is because we have to do one more step before you are free to go. All right, we got one more thing to do. So move this pillow out of the way. Grab pattern piece number 9, which is your pillow insert. This is where you will be placing your pillow form or your polyfill. All right, so what I want you to do is, now I'm not gonna walk you strictly through this part because it's just sewing some straight lines. But what you wanna do is with the right sides together, you want to pin dots at the bottom between both dots, and then both side seams and across the top, all right? And what you're gonna do is you're gonna sew both side seams, the top, and then you're gonna sew dot and dot. So from dot all the way to the edge, and then from this dot all the way to the edge on the other side, all right? And then what you're gonna do after you do that, trim the corners, all 4 corners, And then we're going to turn it right side out like this and give it a press. All right, so I'm going to make sure I poke out the corners, all 4 corners, just like that. First, I'm going to use my fingers because it's the best since sliced bread, right? To use your fingers to not poke any holes. Then after you use your fingers, go ahead and use your point turner. And we're going to poke it out right here with a point turner, just like that on all 4 edges, okay? Or corners, I should say. All right. Once you do that, go ahead and give it a good press. Now, I'm not going to put a pillow in mine right now because I don't have the sites that I need. So I have to go to Joann's to get that. But I just wanted to show you this. But what you're going to do is place your pillow in there or your polyfill, however much you want. And then after you do that, you're going to close this up. Now, one thing I want to tell you is if you do not want to close this up like this, you can add a zipper here to where you can always pull the pillow out and wash the pillow. Another thing that you can do is go ahead and add Velcro right here if that's what you want to do, to where you can always pull it out. Now for me, what I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some snaps right here to be able to pull the pillow out to wash the pillow as well. All right. So now the only thing that you have left to do is in where this area is, all you're going to do is put your pillow insert right there, and that's what happens there. So it's going to go in like this, and I'm hoping you're able to see this. It's going to lay flat, and the only thing you do is take that bottom portion right here, and basically the Velcro will snap, and you have a reading pillow just like this in time for the holidays. All right. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. And if you make this pillow, do not forget to tag me on social media on Instagram at Rochelle.handmade.designs. So I'll catch you in the next video. And as always, keep sewing.